I would say my attitude about life is very positive. I'm for not becoming stagnant and working, and sort of now I've had an opportunity to use everything that I've got going for me. I don't have.
David Cassidy rose to fame in the 1970s as the charming Keith Partridge on The Partridge Family, quickly becoming a global teen idol. His boyish good looks and musical talent brought him immense popularity, but behind the spotlight, Cassidy struggled with mounting personal demons. While fans adored his public persona, few realized he was battling alcoholism, a battle that would span decades. Beneath the glamour, his life unraveled slowly and painfully. Alcoholism not only clouded his judgment, but also eroded his career, finances, relationships, and health. Ultimately, this addiction played the leading role in his tragic downfall and premature death. David Cassidy's journey into stardom began with dazzling speed when he was cast as Keith Partridge in The Partridge Family in 1970. Practically overnight, he became one of the most recognizable faces in the entertainment industry. The show was a hit, but it was Cassidy's charisma and musical talent that propelled him into the realm of a global teen idol. Songs like I Think I Love You topped the charts, and his concerts drew crowds that rivaled Beatlemania. Young girls screamed his name, his posters adorned bedroom walls across America, and he graced magazine covers week after week. It was a whirlwind of fame that few could imagine, let alone handle. However, beneath this picture-perfect public image was a young man struggling to find his footing. The teen idol persona, though lucrative, quickly became suffocating for Cassidy. Despite the fame and financial rewards, he yearned for artistic respect and longed to be taken seriously as an actor and musician. Yet, every attempt to break away from his Keith Partridge image was met with resistance from both the industry and the public. He was relentlessly typecast and pigeonholed into roles that mirrored his clean-cut, boy-next-door television character. This lack of creative freedom was deeply frustrating and disheartening for someone who had genuine musical and dramatic ambitions. The pressures of sudden fame only deepened this internal conflict. Cassidy was not only trying to navigate the demands of a relentless entertainment schedule, but also grappling with a growing identity crisis. Who was he? Really David Cassidy the artist? Or Keith Partridge the character America adored? The emotional burden of sustaining a false image, combined with the industry's exploitation of his appeal, weighed heavily on him. It was during this period that Cassidy began to experience stress and exhaustion, at levels few young stars endure without consequence. Unfortunately, the entertainment world in the 1970s was rife with substance use, and Cassidy was no exception to this environment. Alcohol, initially used recreationally, slowly evolved into a method of self-medication. The high-pressure atmosphere of concerts, tours, press junkets, and fan expectations pushed him to seek temporary relief from emotional fatigue. What started as casual drinking in social settings became a more frequent escape from the emptiness and anxiety he felt privately. While his face smiled brightly in the limelight, internally, Cassidy was beginning to unravel. Alcohol served a dual purpose in his life. It numbed the discomfort of living a double existence and dulled the pain of artistic frustration. Cassidy wasn't drinking merely to have fun or relax. He was drinking to forget, to cope, to function. The seeds of dependency had quietly been sown, even as the world continued to view him as the golden boy of television and pop music. No one could see the toll it was taking beneath the surface. In hindsight, this period marked the beginning of a long, tragic relationship with alcohol. His early fame had come with little emotional preparation, and the demands of being a manufactured idol created cracks that alcohol easily seeped into. While Cassidy continued to perform and charm audiences, his internal world was shifting, and not for the better. These foundational years of celebrity, coupled with unfulfilled dreams and personal dissatisfaction, set the stage for a lifelong battle with addiction. While David Cassidy experienced extraordinary success in the 1970s, his financial trajectory in the decades that followed painted a far bleaker picture. At the height of his fame, Cassidy was earning millions through record sales, concert tours, merchandise, and TV royalties. With such wealth pouring in, he adopted a lavish lifestyle that included luxury cars, sprawling estates, and extravagant spending on clothing and personal indulgences. But like many celebrities thrust into early fame, Cassidy lacked the necessary financial guidance to sustain his fortune long term. Rather than saving or investing conservatively, Cassidy poured money into risky business ventures that often backfired. One of his most notable missteps was a failed horse breeding enterprise, into which he invested substantial capital. He also dabbled in real estate, hoping to turn properties for profit, but these ventures were poorly timed and poorly managed. Cassidy, more focused on maintaining his lifestyle and less on long-term financial strategy, rarely scrutinized his business dealings or the advisors he entrusted with his wealth. Over time, this led to a string of financial losses that could have been avoided with sound counsel and greater caution. Unfortunately, Cassidy's struggle with alcoholism only deepened the problem. As his addiction progressed, his ability to make sound financial decisions deteriorated. Alcohol clouded his judgment and left him vulnerable to manipulation and impulsivity. He often ignored contractual obligations, failed to meet tax deadlines, and neglected essential business matters. The costs of his addiction were not only personal, but also profoundly financial. Legal issues ranging from DUIs to lawsuits and penalties from the IRS mounted over the years, adding significant strain to his dwindling resources. By 2015, Cassidy's financial woes had reached their breaking point. He filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, revealing that he was nearly $1 million in debt. Among the documents submitted were accounts of unpaid legal bills, mortgage arrears, and mounting liabilities that far outweighed his income. The bankruptcy filing was a symbolic fall from grace, showcasing how years of unchecked addiction, mismanagement, and excessive spending had decimated what was once a multi-million-dollar fortune. In the aftermath of his bankruptcy, Cassidy made several attempts to regain stability and reclaim some measure of financial independence. He toured nostalgia circuits, performing for longtime fans who remembered his early glory. He also participated in autograph signings and fan conventions, often appearing at smaller venues to make ends meet. Additionally, he released memoirs and shared personal reflections on fame, addiction, and regret, which offered him brief periods of income and relevance. Yet, despite these efforts, his alcoholism remained a persistent and destructive force. Each step forward was often met with a relapse, a new legal problem, or another failed opportunity. His attempts to rebuild were ultimately undermined by the very addiction that had helped undo his success. The cycle was difficult to break, especially for someone whose identity and coping mechanisms had been tied so tightly to alcohol for decades. Cassidy's financial downfall was not simply the result of bad luck or poor business choices. It was intricately linked to the erosion of his judgment and stability brought on by chronic substance abuse. His fortune, once enviable, slipped away not in a single moment, but gradually eroded by the choices he made while trying to cope with personal dissatisfaction, professional disappointment, and deep-seated addiction. By the end of his life, Cassidy was not only financially bankrupt, but also emotionally and physically spent, a stark contrast to the golden boy the world once adored. Before we take you deeper into his incredible journey, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, All Profiles. Your support helps us continue bringing you more powerful and inspiring stories like his. Thank you for being a valued part of our community. David Cassidy's personal relationships bore deep and lasting scars from the effects of his alcoholism. While his public image in the 1970s was that of a charismatic heartthrob adored by millions, behind the scenes, his private life was fraught with instability, conflict, and emotional estrangement, most of which can be directly traced to his long struggle with addiction. Cassidy was married 3 times, and each of those marriages ended in divorce. His first marriage, to actress Kay Lenz, was brief and troubled. Although their union began with promise, it soon became strained by Cassidy's rising fame and erratic behavior. Alcohol often intensified his mood swings, leading to arguments and emotional distance that Lenz would later describe as unbearable. Cassidy's second marriage to Meryl Tanz followed a similar pattern. Despite their mutual love for horses and a shared business venture in equestrian breeding, Cassidy's drinking habits overshadowed their bond. Financial pressures, failed business efforts, and his increasingly unpredictable behavior led to the collapse of their relationship. His third and final marriage, to Sue Schifrin, lasted longer, but also fell apart under the weight of his addiction. Schifrin stood by him for years, even during his downward spirals, but eventually filed for divorce in 2014 after 23 years of marriage. She cited irreconcilable differences, a term that masked years of emotional distance, drunken outbursts, and a growing inability to trust him. Cassidy's alcoholism not only poisoned his judgment, but also created an environment of instability and inconsistency that no relationship could endure long-term. His wives, at different points, tried to help him, but his refusal or inability to change rendered those efforts futile. Perhaps the most painful and public example of Cassidy's damaged relationships was his estranged bond with his daughter, Cassidy. Born in 1986 from a brief relationship with model Sherry Williams, Katie was raised by her mother and stepfather. Although David provided financial support, he played very little active role in her upbringing. For much of Katie's life, Cassidy was an absent figure, someone she saw more in tabloids than at the dinner table. This absence left emotional wounds that both of them struggled to articulate in interviews over the years. Cassidy offered conflicting accounts of their relationship. In a 2017 interview, he told the press that he had never had a meaningful connection with Katie and didn't raise her, essentially disowning her in public. The comment sparked widespread backlash and reportedly hurt Katie deeply. Yet, in other interviews, Cassidy expressed pride in her acting career and stated that he loved her. This inconsistency reflected the disarray in his thinking, much of it distorted by years of substance abuse. Katie, for her part, admitted to having mixed emotions about her father, feeling both admiration for his fame and confusion over his absence. After his death in 2017, she released a statement saying she found peace, suggesting that while reconciliation never fully happened in life, she had come to terms with the relationship on her own terms. His strained relationships weren't limited to his immediate family. Cassidy also experienced tension with his half-brothers Sean, Patrick, and Ryan Cassidy, all of whom had careers in entertainment. While they once shared close bonds, David's behavior over the years created a rift. Sean, the most publicly successful of the brothers, reportedly distanced himself as David's drinking worsened. Attempts to reconnect later in life were often stifled by Cassidy's erratic moods and bouts of denial. He struggled to maintain consistency in his behavior, leading his siblings to pull away for their own emotional protection. Despite moments of attempted reconciliation, reaching out to family members, attending therapy, and acknowledging his mistakes, David often fell back into old habits. The trust that had once existed within his family circle eroded slowly over the years, leaving behind fragments of a man many had once adored, but no longer recognized. Alcoholism didn't just affect Cassidy's health or career. It sabotaged the very core of his personal identity by dismantling the relationships that should have supported him through hardship. Ultimately, Cassidy's descent into addiction left him emotionally isolated. The people closest to him became casualties of his disease, driven away not by a lack of love, but by repeated hurt, disappointment, and betrayal. The damage to his personal relationships served as a tragic testament to the human cost of addiction, a cost paid not only by the addict, but by everyone who dares to care for them. As David Cassidy's alcoholism intensified, the consequences of his addiction spilled further into the public eye, transforming him from a beloved teen idol into a tabloid fixture. Once known for his charm and talent, Cassidy's name became increasingly associated with arrests, court dates, and erratic behavior consequences that significantly tarnished his legacy and further isolated him from the stability he once sought. Cassidy was arrested multiple times for driving under the influence DUI, a pattern that began in earnest in the early 2010s. These incidents were not only legal missteps, but vivid indicators of how far his addiction had progressed. The most infamous arrest occurred in 2010 in Florida. Police pulled him over for swerving on the road, and he failed the field sobriety test. The dashcam footage was broadcast nationwide, showing a disoriented Cassidy slurring his words and struggling to follow basic instructions. The incident marked a turning point. It wasn't just a personal crisis anymore, it was public humiliation. Following the arrest, Cassidy was ordered to attend an alcohol education program and placed on probation, but the court-mandated interventions did little to reverse his behavior. He was arrested again in 2013 and 2014 for similar offenses, each time eroding what little was left of his reputation. These repeated legal troubles painted a bleak picture of a man caught in the grip of a substance he could no longer control. For fans who grew up idolizing him, it was both shocking and heartbreaking to see their childhood hero in such a state of decline. The impact on his career was devastating. Cassidy attempted to stay active in the entertainment industry by performing on nostalgia tours and at small venues, but the shadow of his addiction followed him. In 2012, he collapsed on stage during a performance, sending shockwaves through the audience. While initial reports cited exhaustion, insiders later admitted that his ongoing battle with alcohol had taken a severe toll on his health. Some fans walked out of shows, disturbed by his slurred speech and forgetful lyrics, while others stayed out of sympathy, aware that they were witnessing the unraveling of a man once filled with promise. The media covered his decline relentlessly. Tabloid headlines focused on his disheveled appearances, run-ins with the law, and repeated promises to get sober. Unlike earlier phases of his career, when Cassidy controlled the narrative through album releases and public appearances, he now found himself the subject of pitying headlines. The once iconic image of Keith Partridge had given way to a sadder, more troubling portrait, one marked by courtroom photos, mugshots, and rehab admissions. Between 2014 and 2017, Cassidy gave a series of interviews that laid bare his physical and emotional deterioration. Viewers noticed how confused he seemed during these appearances, his once sharp mind now clouded by years of alcohol abuse. His interview on Dr. Phil was especially raw, fighting back tears. He confessed that alcohol had ruined his life, acknowledging that he had lied for years about his drinking habits. He said he was in denial and was struggling every day. For many, this candid admission brought a new level of public awareness to the depth of his suffering. Rather than scorn or ridicule, these revelations were often met with sorrow and compassion. Fans recognized the pain behind his behavior, and many empathized with his fight against addiction. Still, empathy did not negate the reality David Cassidy's legal troubles and scandals were irreversible turning points in his downfall. They alienated him from the industry, drained his finances, and underscored how completely his alcoholism had consumed his life. In the end, Cassidy's brushes with the law were not isolated incidents. They were symptoms of a deeper, chronic crisis. The legal record only reflected the larger story, a once brilliant star, slowly extinguished by the disease he could not conquer. David Cassidy's long battle with alcoholism took a devastating toll on his physical and mental health, ultimately contributing to his tragic death at the age of 67. Years of alcohol abuse left his body increasingly fragile and prone to serious complications, while his mind deteriorated in tandem. Despite occasional attempts at recovery, Cassidy was never able to fully escape the grip of his addiction, and his final years were marked by frequent hospital visits, cognitive confusion, and mounting regret. Physically, the damage was severe and irreversible. Prolonged heavy drinking led to cirrhosis of the liver and eventual liver failure, conditions commonly associated with chronic alcoholism. Cassidy also suffered from kidney failure in his later years. Reports of fainting spells and collapses became more common, particularly during public appearances and performances. These frightening episodes were evidence that his body could no longer endure the abuse it had suffered for decades. Though Cassidy sought help in rehab multiple times, including after his DUIs and during periods of intense public scrutiny, none of these efforts led to long-term sobriety. The deterioration wasn't just physical. In 2017, Cassidy publicly revealed he had been diagnosed with dementia, a condition that runs in his family. His grandfather and mother had also suffered from the disease. However, fans and experts alike questioned whether his cognitive decline was rooted in genetic predisposition alone or accelerated by years of alcohol-related brain damage. His interviews and performances during this period were often disjointed and confusing. Cassidy struggled with memory lapses and occasionally contradicted himself in public statements. leading to concern and speculation about the full extent of his mental impairment. In his final days, Cassidy appeared to reflect more deeply on his life, particularly the consequences of his addiction. He was hospitalized in critical condition in November 2017 and died shortly after, on the 21st, from liver and kidney failure. In one of his final recorded statements, Cassidy reportedly expressed profound regret, saying, "So much wasted time." This simple yet heartbreaking admission underscored the emotional weight he carried, especially regarding his estranged relationship with his daughter, Katie Cassidy, and the many opportunities he had lost due to his addiction. Katie's response after his passing revealed the complexity of their bond. Although the two had remained distant for much of her life, she honored him publicly, calling him a very talented and complicated man. She later tattooed his signature on her forearm in tribute, symbolizing both her forgiveness and lasting connection to her father. While Cassidy's musical legacy, especially his work with the Partridge Family, remains cherished by many fans, it is inevitably framed by the tragedy of his final years. Cassidy's death served as a somber conclusion to a life that had once seemed limitless. His story is a painful reminder of how addiction can unravel even the brightest of careers, and how fame, without stability or support, can mask deep internal wounds. David Cassidy's life stands as a heartbreaking reminder of how addiction can erode even the most promising futures. Once a beloved teen idol with global fame, his descent into alcoholism cost him nearly everything: his wealth, family bonds, mental sharpness, and ultimately his health. Despite brief efforts at recovery and flashes of his former self, the lasting consequences of his addiction proved insurmountable. Cassidy's journey reflects not just the dangers of substance abuse, but the hidden toll of fame without adequate support. His story is both a cautionary tale and a call for compassion toward those silently battling their demons. Thank you for watching All Profiles. We truly value your time and support. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button and share it with your friends. Be sure to subscribe to All Profiles and enable the notification bell so you never miss any of our latest uploads. Your interaction means the world to us. And we're excited to have you join us again in the next video.